Hi there. Another one of life principles. Principles to live by principles or simple rules for life. To follow, to be in sync with yourself. Think little. Funny life principle, isn't it? What do you think of it? Why is it a rule to follow? A rule for life? Because think about it, when are you the happiest? When are we the happiest? We're the happiest when we forget about ourselves, when we don't think. When we find so-called oblivion, that's when we are the happiest. That's why people do all sorts of things to find oblivion. I'm not going to go into it now, but you see, the funny thing is that finding oblivion is actually finding yourself in a way, because the self, as I often say, is not the mind, is not the thoughts, it's actually the background on which these thoughts appear and disappear. There is always a tiny little bit of gap between a thought appearing and disappearing, another thought appearing and disappearing. And that gap in between, this is where we experience this consciousness, the background, pure as is. Self. The consciousness, the background is self. This is our true self. Everything else appears and disappears on it, comes and goes. Is born and dies. Everything else, including this body. But the consciousness itself, the background itself, which is you, which is me, which is self, one undivided self, always stays the same and is totally unaffected by whatever appears and disappears, comes and goes. Think about a deep sleep. Deep sleep is one of the best experiences that we have as human beings. When we are in deep sleep, everything is absolutely great. We are not thinking, we forget about ourselves, we get refreshed, we get relaxed, we get energized. It's great, isn't it? And then in between, during the day, when you have periods when you just sort of somehow lose yourself, like in some sort of a trance, in between the thoughts, forget about yourself. It's awesome, isn't it? It's just not thinking, not being aware of yourself, like when you sort of madly fall in love, madly. Why is that such a huge, unbelievably desirable experience? Because you forget about yourself. You're not thinking about yourself, you're not thinking at all, you're just overwhelmed by this experience. So this is it. Think little. Just think when you need to think, when you need to sort of deal with the practical things of this everyday life on a level of a physical experience. That's when you use your mind. That's when you use the thinking. Otherwise, do not think. Settle yourself in that area in between the thoughts. Settle yourself in the background, in the pure background, which is the consciousness. Without thinking, without the mind, without being aware of yourself, pure oblivion. It is so accessible. It does need a bit of practice to sort of be able to reach it and sort of persist with it. But once you realize it, once you sort of realize it's here, it's always here. You don't need to go anywhere. It's always here. It's always with you. This is your real you, this consciousness, this background on which everything else appears. Once you realize that, and once you live by that rule and you think little, and you sort of merge into this background, which is your true self, the life becomes something else. The life opens up. You become this limitless, all-pervading, peaceful, calm, blissful sort of a background consciousness with no start and no end, which is you, and you won't need to struggle anymore. You won't need to look for all sorts of ways to find oblivion, because you will understand and find yourself. that has always been here, that's never gone anywhere. It's just been overlaid with all these impressions, thoughts, pictures, images, everything coming and going all the time. And we falsely identified with them instead of understanding that who we are is actually the background, the consciousness, the never-changing, the all-providing, the limitless, infinite consciousness. Think little. Just do it when you need it. Talk soon. Bye-bye.